it says here at the end of the 6th parak of Klei HaMikdash Ovedimbo, here in Machon Mamre, just as Klei HaMikdash. But we've been talking very little about the Klei HaMikdash, actually. There's more details about Klei HaMikdash in Hilchot Beira Bechira than there is in Klei HaMikdash. And in Klei HaMikdash, we just talked about the anointing oil for the Kalim and the Ketores. And then we talked about Kohanim, Leviim, and Anshe Mamad. So it's more appropriate that people work at the Beis Mikdash. Now we're going to talk about more people. So over here it says, Kohen Shilo Avad Adain Miyamav. We're looking in Anshe Mamad. We mentioned that already. Anshe Mamad Asur Misaper Lemichabeis Kol Shabbat Shalahem. This is relevant for Chol HaMoed. If it's their week, they're not supposed to be doing their laundry and getting their haircut that week. They're supposed to do it beforehand. See, it's the end of the 6th parak, very end of the 6th parak. Okay, there it is. But on Thursday already, they now can. And it's been they showed up on Shabbos, and now it's been Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Another Shabbos is coming, so now they can do some laundry, maybe trim their beards, whatever it is. They can't just do it every day of the week. Why the prohibition? Okay, they shouldn't enter the ma'amad, their time to be on duty, when they're unkept. Ella, it says here, Yisaparu wichabesu mikodem. They have to do so beforehand. What is this reminiscent of? What other gzera, which is coming up, makes it relevant? Remember, there's always somebody to whom this happens. The guy who maybe he's going to shave, I don't know, tomorrow, right? Before Shabbos. And then when does Yontif start? Sunday night, right? He's going to wake up Tuesday morning and be like, oh, good, I'm already, I'm due for a shave. And what do you tell that guy? Sorry, you can't. You're supposed to do it the day before Yontif. You're supposed to do all these things, the cutting the hair and the laundering were forbidden on Chol Moed. Why? Because Chazal wanted you to make sure to go to the barber and do all your laundry and have clean clothes before Yontif starts. So how many times does Yontif start on a Thursday and someone's already, you signed up because you're counting, okay, but don't worry about it, we're still on. So how often does this happen that you have a guy in yeshiva that didn't do this? Or it's like the guy who always forgets the year of Tavshilin. So yeah, it's been unfortunate. I remember the guy came to our house also. He wanted to shave like on the 2nd day of Chol Moed, assuming shaving is mutter. Shaving, if there is a way to do it, then it's just like any other hair cutting. Grooming. Getting haircuts and shaving would be the same din, or trimming one's beard. So there's always someone who's, oops, I didn't do this. I didn't do my laundry. And that's exactly who the Gzera applies. That's exactly who the sages had in mind. The person who's negligent and did not get ready for the Chag beforehand. Okay, so that's Elu Migalchin, right? That's right at the beginning of these all concepts in Moed Katan. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nichya b'dvaro. It's right there in Rashi at the beginning, where there's a head scratcher. Is the Isser Malach on Chol Moed, D'Oraisa D'Rabbanan. What's Rashi Shita? No, read Rashi. This says also in, I forget what's right before that, in Chagiga. Also, Rashi is a real head scratcher. Chagiga is before Moed Katan, right? Okay, so you get to Rashi and Chagiga is starting to confuse you. It's like, what is the nature of the prohibition of malacha on Chol Moed? And Rashi seems to say it's like the Rabbanan D'Oraisa. It's really not clear, and it's a major machlokas Rishonim. And reading Rashi is also, you can't say Rashi says one way, Rashi says the other. You could read Rashi if you're, I guess this would be a type of Rashi that you teach guys who are learning Gemara to show them how to like work it through. It's Rashi that reads like a Tosfos almost, and it's I don't know. So and that's why it's a major machlokas of the Rishonim. Mishneh Berurah also brings it right at the beginning. The whole nature of Chol Moed is subject to great dispute.
I have a really bad proof for Rashi holding that it's D'Rabbanan.
Well, I don't care about bad proofs unless you want to entertain us with it.
Yeah, sure. Well, Rashi pretty clearly holds that you wear tefillin on Chol Moed because he says this in Kiddushin. I believe it's somewhere around like 29, 30 around there. And he says that, and so if he holds that malacha is doraita, then malacha is the oath in all according except Tosfos seems to suggest otherwise, but I wouldn't assume that he necessarily holds according to that. Most hold that the oath is malacha, and if malacha is a doraita, then he would have said Chol Moed instead of just Shabbat Yom Tov.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see that. It's the Tosafos who then bring, by the way, there. They say, yeah, what is the oath of, let's say, Sukkot? What makes it an oath? The Yisr Malacha and the fact that you have to eat in the Sukkah and Lulav and Esrog, even during Chol Moed. Okay, could be. Let's see. New chapter. Chabisha Asar Minunim Hayu Bamikdash. 15 men with jobs, and apparently many of them are Kohanim, basically. 15 Kohanic officials. We're not talking about just the ones that Rambam mentioned before. We said there was a hierarchy. There was the Sagan and the Amarkalim and the Katolim and whatever. No, not the Katolim. There's a what's the word there? One of the words, something with a Katol. I forget it. Katolim is not the right word. It says here, Chamisha Asar Mimunim Hayu Bamikdash. L'chein mimanim leolam al kol davar mechamisha asar davar elu mimunei echad be'eluhim. So there's these 15 appointees in the Mikdash, and there's always these 15. Why? Because there's 15 things that you need someone in charge of. By the way, you can't say like, okay, give someone, he's really good at this job, we'll give him 3 jobs. 15 separate jobs. Apparently it's a takanat chazal, that it has to be this way. There's the one who's al azmanim. By the way, we're going to explain everything. What does it mean? The one who's basically the timekeeper. Al nilat sharim, the one who locks the gates. Al shomrim. That's going to be fairly, we've mentioned them before. Al hamishorim, the singers. Al atziltzel im shar klei shir. Some have tziltzal with the comets, and others have it with the tzerei. The ones in charge of the actual sing. These are the singers, the mishorim, and number 5 is the ones who are in charge of the musical instruments. Ala Payasot. The Payasot is the system that they had to determine who is going to be doing which service. Al HaKinim. Kinim are pairs of birds used as korbanot. Many different people have to bring the turtle doves or the pigeons as a sacrifice. So kin means 2 of these animals. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a nest. Okay, it's an expression. Al Chotamot, the ones in charge of the stamps. The stamps are basically vouchers to show that a person paid for a certain sacrifice. In the temple, for many of these things, it became the practice that the temple would provide the animals to people, and the people just bring the money. Why? Because in the olden days, it used to be that everybody was in charge of bringing their own animals to the temple. And then they'd have to check them for mumim, and it was a little bit difficult. So the temple just made it, the animals are mostly here for certain things. You just have to pay the money and give the guy the stamp, and you could go to the place where they have the animals, and you hand in the chotam, and you get the animal. Okay. Al nisachim, the one in charge of the libations. Al ha-chulim. What's a chulim here? Notice the word here. What does it mean? So the Rambam's going to say later, we skip ahead. What? Okay. So it says here, they used to have one who destroys this. Hold on 1 second. I want to show you what Makbili points out here. There's a Makbili here. Wait, where did I put it? I switched my books on Yom Kippur. Yeah, okay. So what it's talking about here, just wanted to confirm this. There's Kohanim who are not well. This is the infirmary guy. Okay, that's all it means. Al Hamayim, the ones in charge of the water. Al Maseh Lechem Apanim, making the showbread. Al Maseh Aktoret, Al Maseh Parochot. How often they were making new parochot, new curtains? How many parochot were in the second temple? Basically 3. The main door to the temple had a paroches that they open every morning. And to separate between the Holy of Holies and the Holies were 2 parochot. That goes basically from ceiling to floor. Al Maseh Bigdei Kuna Gedolah, and also the one in charge of the Kohen Gadol's vestments. Now he's going to explain them in this whole chapter here. Kol echad vechad mimunim elu. Every one of these appointees, tachat yado anashim harbeh. He actually has other helpers, not just one person, but he's the one who's in charge. Kidei la'achina malacha shehu mimuneh aleh, in order to prepare whatever it is, the work in which he is in charge. Okay. Zeh shel azmanim hu mishamer azmanim. This one who's in charge of the times, his job is, once again, to make sure that everything is on charge of the time. Hu ivan ashav. This is, by the way, before everybody had a wristwatch. How do you tell the time on a cloudy day back in the day?
You could have a water clock.
A water clock? I mean, or an hourglass. You could do both, but the problem is you have to know when to start it. You say objective. Yes, they were able to create hourglasses and things like that, but it's still hard to tell. Like, when do you start the clock? So you notice when, even on a cloudy day, you notice once it gets to maximum brightness. If it's cloudy day already, shortly after sunrise, it's as bright as it's going to get because of refraction. Okay, the clouds act like that and it's only when it starts. Only when it's after sunset, you know it's actually starting to get dark. That's not relevant in the temple because they're already closing up shop before sunset. So this is the timekeepers. Kevan shiagia eda korban machrizhu o echad me'anashav birshuto v'omer. Once it's time to bring the korban, usually the one in the morning, he announces it, or one of his men announces it. Imdu kohanim lavoda. Kohanim, stand up, get to work. Leviim leducham v'Yisrael mamad. Leviim, take your place on the stage. The duchan is the stage because they were singing on the stage, and the Yisrael go to the assembly. They have to stand over the korban. When they hear him, everybody gets to work. One in charge of locking the gates. He's the one who tells everybody, open the gates or unlock the gates. Those ones who sound the trumpets, they do it when he says, sound the trumpets. Now, also notice the ambiguity of what the Rambam is saying here. Every day, they would have 3 tekiyas for opening the gates. And by tekiya, I mean a tekiya, trua, and a tekiya. Tekiya sometimes means just that, a tekiya, as opposed to a trua or a shvar. Mm-hmm. And sometimes a tekiya means any sound with the shofar or with the trumpets. Okay? See that? It's right here. So whenever you hear a tekiya, do you mean the more general sound, means a sounding of the trumpet or the shofar? Or do you mean a specific long straight blast and not something that's wavering like a trua? Okay. Zesh ala shomerin, the one who's in charge of the gate, in charge of the guards, hu ish harabayit. We mentioned him before. Remember, in the end of Hilchot Beira Bechira, talks about the fellow who's in charge, make sure all the Kohanim and Levim are on duty and can actually attack the Kohanim and Levim who are being a little bit lackadaisical or sleeping on the job. Shem is Savev al Levim b'chol laila. He goes around checking all the Levim at night. Anybody who's sleeping on his watch, Malkeoto b'maklot v'storific suto. Remember, he could light his clothes on fire, or he could whack him with a stick. And they said, "What's the sound of that? What's that screeching coming from the base of HaMikdash?" Oh, it's a Levi. He's getting his punishment. Zeh shal mishovarim, the one who's in charge of the singers, hu bo rebechayom hamishovarim shomdim ala duchan lomar shira b'feh. He's the one who finds the best singers for that day, who can sing. And they're going to sing there because they have to do it by their mouths. They can't play instruments. We saw this before. Now, piv tokein al korbanot. He's also the one who tells everybody when to sound the trumpets for the various korbanot. Ein pochatin b'mikdash me'achat ve'esrim tekiya b'chol yom. There is no such thing as less than 21 tekiyas every single day. Okay? I put a note here. Don't forget, tekiya in this case is the more general rule. Okay? Shalosh liftichat sharim. 3 tekiyas. Remember, this includes one trua. One of these tekiyas is a trua. 3 for the opening of the gates. Keep count. V'teisha l'tamid shel shachar. 3 plus 9 is how many? 12. V'teisha l'tamid shel me'er Bar-Hayim. Another 9. 9 plus 12 is 21. Okay, because why? There's only 2 sacrificial services that are required every single day. Like I said, what's the slowest day in during the temple? I guess a cold winter day in the middle of January after Hanukkah. Not that many pilgrims are coming. It's all the Bikurim are done. It's basically the hardest time. It might be rainy and cold. So you can imagine that there's not much happening in the temple that day. And also the Kohanim might not be so excited about working that day. V'yom sheish bo korban musaf. When there's a musaf, usually a musaf consists of how many? 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs. 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs. It comes out to 10. And a he-goat for a sin offering, which comes out to how many extra animals? 11. 2 plus 1 plus 7 plus 1 is 11. That's the musaf for, let's say, Pesach, Shavuos, and Rosh Chodesh. And if it's Shmini Atzeres, Yom Kippur, or Rosh Hashanah, it's 1 less, 10. And if it's Sukkot, it's a lot more. You got, the bulls, the rams, 14 lambs, and we keep reducing the number of bulls, but it's at least 7 bulls. And the he-goat for a sin offering, so it's a lot more. But whenever they have a musaf, Mosifin Teishal Korban Musaf. What's the total now? How many tekiyot do you have? 21 plus another 9 is 40. V'imchal Rosh Chodesh or Yom Tov Liot Shabbat. Let's say you have 2 musafim now. Shabbos is a musaf, and Rosh Chodesh could be that Shabbos, or Yontif could be that Shabbos. So you're going to have how many? Oshachal Rosh Hashanah Liot B'Shabbat Shisham Shlosha Musafim. 3 musaf day. Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah. So it's a Yontif and there's Rosh Chodesh and there's, come on. The food's over here if you want. The food's here. Okay. So you could have all these, and what's it going to mean? Ain't talking chol musaf musaf if niatzmo. If you have to double up the musaf, you're not going to have double tekiyas. You're going to stop it at 40. Ela tokin tesha bilvad l'chol musafim. Okay, 9. Okay, extra musaf doesn't mean extra tekiyot. So you could have thought that, well, the fact that Shabbos Rosh Hashanah means I'm going to have to sound another 27 tekiyot, right? 3 types of musaf. No. Be'erev Shabbat mosifim sheish. On Erev Shabbos, we have another 6 tekiyos. Shalosh lehavtil ta'am min ha'malacha, with shalosh lehavdil ben kodesh l'chol. That means at the end. 3 tekiyos. The Rambam explains this earlier in Hilchot Shabbos. He talks about, like the Mishneh says, they would even do this outside the base of HaMikdash. Everywhere there's Jews, they have to have 1 warning sound and another warning sound, and then the official Shabbos is here sound. And nowadays, there are certain communities where they have a siren. The Shabbos is in siren. Have you guys been to Brooklyn? Thank God, in central Brooklyn, the Jews have a Shabbos siren. And in Jerusalem, there's I think there's 2 sirens. You could hear it. It's an amazing thing to hear. Certain places you can't hear it so well. At Or Sameach, you don't hear it so well, at least when I was down there, because Or Sameach is at the bottom of the Beis Yisrael hill. It's like when you're at Kikar Shabbos, it's already downhill from Strauss Street. So the highest point is where Bikur Cholim is. That's basically at the top. That's like one of the higher points in Jerusalem. And from Bikur Cholim, if you go down Strauss and Yechezkel Street, it's mostly downhill from there, right? And you get already down to Arzei Biro, and you're really down in the valley there. So it used to be you didn't hear it so well there. Yeah. So you can kind of, but sometimes you don't. You're in the wrong room, you don't hear it. But when you're, let's say, at the Lev Yerushalayim, you hear it very clearly. Okay. Could you plug this in for me? Thanks. So they do this, and here in Tel Zion they have, it's not a siren. Well, they play music. Oh yeah, Shabbos, Shabbos. The kids know the song, and they play Lichadodi, even if it's Yontif, even if it's Yom Kippur. They don't have a system to have something that's more specific for Yontif. So they say, okay, what's it good? Lichadodi, Lichrat Kahala Pen. So it's very nice. So that's the way they used to do this, and this is a very Jewish minhag. It's the proper thing. Then it says that they also have to sound because they'll tell people Shabbos is over. Uva regel mosifin shalosh liftichat sha'ar hatachton. When they open up the lower gate, what's the lower gate? They say over here. It's not the main gate. It means he says who shar is ratnashim, the gate to the women's courtyard when they let in the pilgrims. So they also have this. The regel, it seems to be saying even on Rosh, that's also Chol Moed. Regel includes Chol Moed. The shalosh liftichat shar halyon vu shar nikanor. And the upper gate, which is the shar nikanor, which actually goes into the actual azara. They have another 3 tekiyas. Because it's higher than the Ezrat Nashim. You saw that there's a few steps that lead up from the Ezrat Nashim to the Nikanor gate. They sound another 3 shofaro when they do this whole water drawing. When with Shabbos, just like they don't have the water the whole party, Also, they don't have the sounding of the trumpet when they would do this, when they fill the water up for Shabbos. You'll have another shalosh tekiot, shru tekiah, when they would pour the water libation on the altar. All these shofar blasts, which says they basically the things that they did with the chatzot, they were under the charge of this one fellow, the same person in charge of the song of the Levium. The chol elat tekiot b'chatzot. And once again, all these tekiot were done with horns, the trumpets, not with the shofar. What's mean a trumpet and a shofar? Shofar is comes from an animal. It's a ram's horn, and the chatzotzrot are metal instruments like we make today. Very interesting. So this fellow, if he's a kohen, he's never going to be doing the singing. We saw it also. Kohen's not allowed to do the Levi's job of singing. So the ones who charge of the singing is basically one who would never actually sing. Interesting. Okay. Zeh sha'al tziltzal hu ha'ma'amid kol mishorim al pi kli hashir shesuadin et halavim. What's suadin in this case mean? Hold on 1 second. Excuse me. The one who's in charge of the cymbal. Okay, the tziltzal is the cymbal. So we said that there's only one guy on the cymbal, and anybody who's a Jew can even play the cymbal. You don't have to be a Levi. Anybody see a real symphony orchestra with a conductor? Have you ever been to one of those? Really? You've never been? I think the at least is the way it was 10 years ago and more, the Jerusalem Philharmonic, which plays at that Jerusalem Theater, which is, whatever, it's in town. The conductor is also like the president of like Vermont University or something like that. A Jewish guy was the head of a university in like Vermont or Maine, and he's also the conductor of the Jerusalem Philharmonic. Very strange. That was a he traveled back and forth. So I see this fellow, the conductor. How do you know he's the conductor? Does he play a violin? Does he play a cello? He has a stick, has a baton basically. He has to dress, and he basically has to use that baton and his hand motions to tell everybody when he's in charge of the timing, basically, how to sing. So that's an amazing thing. In the olden days, the conductor of the Levitic choir was the guy with the cymbal. Apparently, the cymbal is the sign. He's the one who's leading everything and telling everybody how to sing. He is the one who stands up. He basically puts everybody in place, all these singers, along with the Klei shir, the soadin. What's soadin? If you were Avram Avinu, lis'od means to have a meal, from the word seudah. But in Aramaic, it means more like assistance, or sa'id. Who's a sa'id? Okay, it means accompanying the Levites. So the Klei shir are the ones that are accompanying the song of the Levites. Moshe B'Yarnu. What was that? Siyua is to help out in Aramaic without a dalet. That's what you're going to ask? Yeah.
To cause him to walk.
Cause him to walk? No, I don't see that. Really? That's what it means? I'm not talking about the verb soadin.
Isn't that a verb about steps?
No, that's so'ed with an ayin. Mitzad would be like a march. Okay, you're thinking with a sadi, not a samich. They might be related, but I don't think there's a march here. It means the ones who are basically doing a musical accompaniment. Okay, that's what the Mefarshim say. It's like when Rambam, when Avraham Avinu said "Sa'adu li bechem," have enough meal. Told his angelic guests, have a meal. But it definitely doesn't mean the ones who are feeding them, giving them food. Okay. Zeh shalap hayasot. Want to charge the lottery? Who mefis ben akwanim b'chol yom? He's what actually does is the 21st finger, but they use their thumbs. Ad sheyeh kol ish v'isha oseh melachto sheyes kebav b'payis. Everybody has to do a job. He's the one who distributes the jobs based on the pious. V'arba'ah pamim hayu mefisim b'chol yom. They do this pious 4 times a day. Uvilchot timidin avaer kitzat hayu mefisim. When we get to Hilchot timidin, I'll explain how they used to do this. Okay, thank you, Rambam. Hamamuneh she'al akinim. The one who's in charge of the nests, which means pairs of birds for sacrifice. Hu sheposkini mo shem korakinim lekorbanot. This is actually subject to dispute. You're going to see in the notes also. There's there's quite a an argument here. Is he the one who buys up everything and he has to buy it wholesale and sell it back to everybody? Where's the money go? Let's just read what the Rambam says. They poskin. Who's they? It means the ones in charge of the temple treasury, the ones who have the money. They make a deal with him. Shem kor kinim la korbanot. He's the one who has to sell the kinim for the korbanot. People come, I want birds. Kach v'kach b'sela. How much everybody gets for a sela? Sela was basically the shekel back then. The chol mishu chayav torim o b'nei onah. Whoever is obligated to bring what torim are what? Those are pigeons. Okay? And b'nei onah are turtle doves. Yavid mehen lamikdash. He brings just their money. How much he would have to pay to get these things to the temple. He's the one who supplies the Balei Korban with their kinim. And then he brings all his money to the Gizbarin, or he says how much he sold, and they pay him for it. This reminds me of the deal they had back in Shmuel's going to Machon Shilo. What they have? They had a mechraz. Mechraz is basically an auction. They need someone to run the food place at Machon Shilo. It's basically a restaurant to make sandwiches for the guys, so they don't have to go to the cafeteria, just sandwiches. So they want the person who could offer, let's say, a sandwich with a schnitzel in it, but at a price that's good. The one who could offer the schnitzels at the lowest prices to the students. Now, of course, someone's just going to say, well, they have their own operating costs, etc. So they have to factor in who can do it the cheapestly would get the job. So that's basically what the Beis HaMikdash here is doing. They need to find someone who can find the birds and is willing to do this job, but also get it at a fair price that the Mikdash is happy with. So that's what he's doing. Mishloshim yom lishloshim yom poskinu ashar. So every 30 days, they look at the books and they decide what the prices should be. There's a price control on this. Now, this thing actually, it turns out here in Israel, that they have a lot of government price control on what basic commodities that you can get in the stores. You guys go shopping? They always have a sign up in the makolet. It says, for example, that the bread is price controlled and milk is price controlled, among other things. Those are the two major ones that they have in this country. But what has that done, by the way? Think about your economics and your libertarianism. It made it that they did this, for example, butter. They told the dairy companies, you can't charge more than X for whatever is 50 grams of butter. So what happened? It wasn't worth it for the butter producers, the dairy people, to spend, whatever it is, a certain amount of milk, whatever it takes to make butter. So they just stopped making butter because the government didn't allow them to charge enough that made it profitable for them. So only like 2 companies continued making butter, and there was basically a butter shortage here before the China virus thing. You guys heard about the butter shortage? Yeah, it was a major thing. I remember because my neighbor is the one who somehow was the one getting it. He had to hook up with butter and all that stuff. He was advertising all around here. It's like the only store where you could actually get butter sometimes in the entire Binyamin area. Binyamin meaning the areas north of Jerusalem. That was his shtick. That's how he cornered the market. So the problem was with price control. If you do this with something that you'd want people to supply with to the community, if you say, yeah, I want to help the community, I want to make it that that which everybody has to buy will be nice and cheap. If you cheapen it too much, then suppliers, producers, will not want to do that. They talk about Rabbi Gamliel has a case that he thought they were price gouging outside the temple. They were charging too much for certain, let's say, these pairs of birds. So Rabbi Gamliel instituted price control. That doesn't mean that price controls are the best thing. Conversely, they have this thing called minimum wage. And Chazal also discussed this type of idea. If you say that you have to pay your workers a certain amount of minimum money, you're going to say, yeah, that's good. Now the workers are guaranteed a certain amount of salary, but what instead does it cause? It makes that people don't want to hire the workers. It's too costly, and then they end up firing people, and people can't get jobs. So price control is a very tricky thing. Very, very tricky. So it says every 30 days they were basically discussing with this fellow how much is the going rate for birds. V'im huz luakinim. Let's say the price is going down for these birds. Glut of birds. Misapek yashar hazol, so you should give it at the low price. V'im hu kru, suddenly the price of birds have gone up. This guy says, don't worry, I will provide 2 pigeons for everybody, I don't know, for 100 shekels. A woman comes to the temple for her childbirth, she needs to bring 2 birds. I'll supply 2 birds for 100 shekels. V'im hu kru. Suddenly he can't get it for 100 shekels. Suddenly the birds where he's getting it from the fellows, I guess, who have the dovecotes, who are bringing the birds into Jerusalem, and from whom he buys them because he doesn't grow birds. He works at the temple all day. Suddenly, each one costs him 100 shekels. It's not worth it. He's not. There's no, or it costs even more. It costs 105 shekels for each pair of birds. But he's telling people already. The Kohanim established a week ago that a pair of birds is going to be costing what? 100 shekels. Oh, the price has gone up. He's actually stuck. So he's going to be taking a loss of 5 shekels on each bird, or each pair of birds. Shiata Kodesh Al Yonah. Yada Kodesh, the Beis HaMikdash wins. If the prices, remember it says here, if they got cheaper, so the Beis HaMikdash is still getting 100 shekels per bird, even though now this guy could get them for much cheaper. So people are paying the Beis HaMikdash for the privilege of having birds from the Beis HaMikdash. They could have also bought birds for 90 shekels. The birds have gotten cheaper, but whatever. The Beis HaMikdash, you show up at the Beis HaMikdash, the price was set at 100. So they're giving the Beis HaMikdash 10 more shekels for something they could have bought right outside the Beis HaMikdash. And the hefech, this guy's getting the short end of the stick. Yada Kodesh Al Yonah. The whole Cain, it says, yeah, what's a Khan? Khan Sipor. Why did I say Cain? Correct vowelization is Cain. What's Khan? The Spichut. Khan Sipor is the Cain of a Tzipor. Okay. Shnimsa Pasul, Shnimsal Kodem Sheikrav. Notein Acher Tachtav. And not only that, he takes all the psulim at a loss. If he gave it to them and it turns out it's puzzle, so he has to supply a new one. He has to give a new one. So this is a risky business, by the way. Okay, there are those who interpret these halachas differently than the Rambam, but that's just an idea. You'd hope that this is whatever it is, the Gizbar is compensating, it's making someone worth this job, because it's very hard to deal with temple funds. Okay, why? You misuse temple funds. Why does the temple always get the upper hand in any deal? Because saying, "Oh, I beat the temple, I ended up, making money off of them," it's approaching the avera of me'ilah. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. Okay, let's see more halachot. The one in charge of the stamps or the vouchers, how it works. Zeh shalachotamot hu mishakapel dimei hanesachim mimechuyavei nesachim. He receives the money from people who have to bring nesachim. Rambam's going to say maybe also some minachot count as nesachim. Nesachim is the libations. Minchat nesachim is the libations that come with the nesachim, the meal offerings. V'notein lahem chotamot. He gives them stamps, which basically pieces of earthenware that have been stamped. Whatever it is, they have an official mark on the temple. You'd hope that people couldn't counterfeit these things. V'zeh shal nesachim hu shemocher nesachim. And the one who's in charge of the nesachim is what actually sells these libations. Ketzad, how does it work? Arba'a chotamot hayu b'mikdash. There were 4 stamps in the temple. Echad katuv alav egel. One said on it calf. Asheni katuv alav zachar. One says a male. What is a male in this case? It means a male sheep. Okay, an aisle. Okay, so it means it's a keves is ben shana if it's in its first year. That's the type of thing they would bring for Korban Pesach. It's really small, or Korban Tamid. Once it grows up into an aisle, it's a ram. It's already 2 years old. Okay, so that's what it means a zachar. And what is it? Well, there's one animal. It's called dichrin. Okay, it's based on the Aramaic. There's this animal in Aramaic is called dichrin. It means zecharim. Okay, but that's the name of the animal. Next, see where were we over here? I have to find the computer. And the third was katuv alav gedi. What's a gedi? It means a little lamb. Ravi katuv alav chotei, sinner. Oh man, what does a sinner have to bring? What's a sinner mean? Well, not necessarily a chatos. There's many different types of chataot. It says here, niskal mitzurash mevish shlosha korbanot minatzon. Okay, the person who's most likely a sinner is the person who has it on his. You could see it on his forehead, for example. A regular person who's bringing a chatos is not necessarily a sinner. He's a b'shogeg, right? That's true. If you were like mazid, you don't bring a korban, you get lashes. There's no korban for a person. But if you speak lashon hara, you don't have to bring a korban. You can't say it's shogeg. What happens to you is you become a mitzora, and it's actually on your skin. It's like for your sin becomes visible to everybody. So when you purify yourself, that's what you're bringing. It says here in this game, it's Rosh Revish, Shlosha Korbanot Minatzon, Chatat, Asham Ve'olah, Ushloshtam Ba'im im Nisachim, Musach Lekach, Sarich Lavi, Od Log Shemen L'Tarato, V'nikra Chotei, Ketzarat Baal Chata'av. Okay, look, I just told you. There's only one person who's a chotei who brings a sin off, brings an offering to the temple, and that's the mitzorah. Everybody else who's an actual sinner cannot expiate his sin just by bringing a korban. Like, I think we just had Yom Kippur here. Person who actually sinned intentionally, right? What's the solution? What does he have to do? He has to repent.
Well, it depends on whether it's.
Yeah, okay, but the point is, you can't just bring a korban. By the way, this is a problem. A lot of people have this primitive idea regarding sacrifice. It's that you sin or you do something wrong, so how do you make up for it? Just give a fat offering to God, an indulgence basically. Give a lot to tzedakah. So you're a crooked businessman. You're up to no good. So you give a nice hefty portion of that to tzedakah. It should make it better, right? Really? Oh, that doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, a lot of people have this primitive idea. Okay. Next. Okay, I read this. Sorry about that. Whoever brings his korbanot to the mikdash gives his funds to the person in charge of the chotamot. And he gives him his stamps based on whatever korbanot he is supposed to bring. If he's a rich mitzorah, gives him one stamp that says sinner. Oy, poor guy. And then he goes with these stamps to the person charged in Nesachim. Why? The Nesachim depend on how much animal he's bringing in, also the size of the animal. What's the biggest thing? Okay, what does it say? Remember for Rosh Chodesh, if you have a whole bowl, it's half a hin of wine. Okay, ushlishi tahin la'ayil, a third of a hin for a ram. That's a smaller animal. Revi tahin la'keves achad. Okay, and just a revi'it of a hin if it's just a keves. So you see the size of the animal, depending on what he's bringing, there's a certain amount of wine he has to bring. And where does the wine come in? Wine comes like it used to. Wine still is wine. Either if you have a large quantity of wine, you put it in a barrel, and if you have smaller quantities of wine, you put it in bottles. Right? That's how wine used to work, and nothing much has changed except they used the glass bottles also back then. Well, but they used to use bottles also. Okay, bakbuk is a biblical word. Yeah. Okay, you can find it in there. Next. Then, as you know, it's getting dark, they come to each other. The guy in the chotamot and the sachim. This one takes out all the chotamot. Here, these are all the chotamot I collected from people who bought korbanot for me. And he gets money for those. There's extra money somehow, so hektish wins. If it doesn't make up for the costs, this fellow who's in charge of chotamot will have to pay out of his own pocket. And the English expression is pay out of pocket, and here it means pay out of his own house. That's the rabbinic idiom, pays for himself. So it makes you wonder, these middle jobs over here, like the chotamot guy and the sachim guy and the kinim guy, are basically taking a financial risk for this job in the Beis HaMikdash. So obviously there was some other incentive to make them want to do it because of basically the person that had this risk that he has no chance to profit really, because whatever profits that goes to the Beis HaMikdash. But if there's a loss, he's the one who's taking the loss. So what does that mean? Like I said, sometimes the job isn't so popular. We mentioned last week. Why would someone want to be Kohen Gadol necessarily? What does an actual Kohen Gadol have to do? Spend every single day in the Beis HaMikdash. He's not supposed to take a vacation. Even if he's not in the Beis HaMikdash, he stays in Jerusalem. He's basically, like we said, the guy who's stuck in the Ir Miklat. The guy in the Ir Miklat basically is the Rotzeach Bishkaga. Leaving Ir Miklat is at his own risk. So too, the Kohen Gadol has no real reason to leave the Beis HaMikdash. So it makes you wonder why someone would want necessarily that privilege. I said it's more of a predicament than a privilege. Okay. Mi she'avad chotamo, Mamtinin lo ada arif. Let's say a person brought X amount of money to the temple. He has to bring a ram as a sacrifice. That's the only thing he could do. So he paid for a ram. He got the stamp for a ram. Before he could get to the guy who's going to give him the animal for the stamp, he lost the stamp. It's gone. Now his money's gone. He has to bring a sacrifice. What is he going to do? I should read it from my book. Okay? Yeah, he says, I was supposed to bring a ram today, and I lost it. And eventually, if it was on the floor or something like that, it would get collected. Why would someone leave the base of HaMikdash with all these stamps? They're worthless outside the base of HaMikdash. So eventually, another stamp has shown up in the account books. There's an extra stamp. Someone paid for this, but he claims he didn't bring his sacrifice. No, lo, so he gets it. V'im lav, enot im lo. Not, so they don't give it to him. V'shem kol ayom katuv al chotam. Each chotam had that day of the week. So Tuesdays in the temple, they're using the Tuesday stamps. That way someone can't come in with a Monday stamp and say, oh, I brought, they can't lead to confusion like that. It only has the day of the week always written on it. And it says, people tried to cheat this. He doesn't want all of the chotam, so he could use this chotam that he paid, let's say, 10 shekels for this. And now the price of, let's say, the libations have gone up. He's a hoarder, basically. So he's going to use this stamp to libations that are now worth 20 shekels. Do you guys remember anything about hoarders and subway tokens? You know what a subway token is? Oh, man. Where do you guys grow up? Anybody here from the New York area? Okay. When I was a teenager, they phased this out already. It used to be, if you wanted to go on the subway or mass transit in New York, one ride was a token. The token looks like a coin. I remember having tons of these in the house. What? And they have the tube, right? It used to be in New York City, so they had these tokens. I don't know how much the token cost, but you used to have to buy a whole lot at the subway station. And every man had to carry around, aside for the fact that he used to have to carry around money, he also needed these subway tokens in order to ride the subway or other forms of mass transit. And eventually they phased them out. They replaced them with basically a card similar to your Ravkov, but this is already 30 years ago, I guess. No, not 30 years ago, maybe a little bit. 25 years ago, they came up with something called the not Easy Pass, that's the toll booth thing. It's the Metro card, which is basically a Ravkov. Okay, Metro card. They used to give them out for free also if you're a student or a high school student, you got to go on the subway for free, which is great, by the way. Thank you, New York City. Or the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which, by the way, was the same acronym as our school. We were an MTA, Manhattan Talmudical Academy, which eventually got a much longer acronym, but it stayed MTA for short. Yeshiva University High School for Boys, Rabbi Isaac Elflingon Theological Seminary, Marcia Stern Talmudical Academy. 10 letters there? So it was also the MTA is the name of the company that runs all the mass transit in the New York City area. So they had this thing about people would hoard subway tokens. Why? Let's say a token costed $0.25. That was the cost of a token, subway token back then. So they bought a lot of them, and they knew eventually the MTA would set the fare at a token now costs $0.25, half a dollar, or maybe even $1. So all these people who hoarded these tokens, okay, so they benefited from the fact that they hoarded the tokens right before the price jumped, because now they were still paying less. So too, that's what they were worried about in temple times. This fellow paid for stamps to buy nisachim when the nisachim were at a certain rate, and now the price of the wine has gone up, so the stamp could get you more wine. Okay, so they didn't want people to do that, hoarding these base HaMikdash tokens, basically.
Is it up
Well,
to the man in charge of the Hilchot to decide what the steps
look like?
Not as in there's a difference from day to day, right? There's different
Yeah,
days of the week.
there's the Sunday stamps and the Monday stamps, apparently. Yeah.
Does he make that decision, or like if it gets even worse, can he make like new days? Like now it's a cycle of like 9 days, so now it's hard to figure out.
Well, no, the temple basically ran on a weekly basis, and don't forget this Mimuneh. Apparently, we know that the Kohen Gadol doesn't change with his mishmar. Perhaps it is that these Mimunim are part of each mishmar. I'm not clear about this one. Is these 15 men, are all these 15 men only that week they're in the temple, or are they 15 permanent men? I would think that's 15 men with the mishmar because it was 15 permanent men. Then they would be in the list previously of the Kohen Gadol and his subordinates, the Sagan and the next three, or on that the next level. This is implying that these 15 men switch out every week,
Oh,
so they don't have the ability to do this.
They don't actually have
Yeah.
the authority to change. The,
Yeah. Or even if you say they're sort of permanent, they still don't have the authority to do this. They're basically put in charge by the Beis HaMikdash people. Who's in charge of the Beis HaMikdash? In one sense, there's a Sanhedrin that makes all decisions. In other, there's the Beis Din of the Kohanim, like a Sanhedrin specifically of Kohanim, whose job is to make these decisions in temple matters. So he can't just do this himself. He has a job to do. And maybe he could bring it up to his superiors, the decision makers, what's going on. But before that, it doesn't really work. And it says here, every 30 days, they would decide the shar. Bishloshim yom l'shloshim yom, posekin shar yain vasod imam emuneh al nesachim. They decide how much the solet, that is the fine flour for the meal offerings, with the fellow in charge of the libations. Why? Because the Rambam points out, libations includes meal offerings and libations. It's called minchat nesachim. The minchas of the nesachim. Im hu kru nesachim, if these libations go up in price, misapek le'en kamosha pasku imo. He still has to supply them at the original price he established. Oh no, this guy said he's going to provide food at Machon Shilo, sandwiches. He's going to provide a schnitzel sandwich for 20 shekels each to the students who come into there. And now his operating costs have gone up. He is either going to tell them, look, let me raise my price or I'm going out of business, or I'm not going to do this. It's not worth it for me. But the problem is he still has to provide them at the price that they'd agreed upon earlier. Vim who's Lou, now it's like cheaper. You can't say, well, now I'm going to make a profit. No. Misapek le'en kashar hazol. He still has to provide it at the lower price. V'asachar shemistaker hekdesh b'sharim elu. Okay, the profit, the sachar that hekdesh gets out of this, hu anikra motar nesachim. That's called the mosar nesachim. The profits from the sachim. V'olchim bo olot leketza mizbeach, and that's used to buy burnt offerings to keep the mizbeach going. Ketz mizbeach, we said, is slow day. So, there's a tummy in the morning, tummy in the afternoon. Not that many sinners are showing up. Sorry, people shogegim, or people at the Toda. It's a slow day in the temple. So they do another round. Basically, it takes an hour and a half to do a korban tamid, one lamb, with the whole tekes. So they'll do another lamb. Okay, fill up the time. Atem mechapsim lo tapes. Like, atem mechapsim sefer mesuyam. Okay, good. So let's see what rhymes on. Okay. Next. Let's see. Let's say what are they putting on the mizbeach now to fill the time? Not even lambs. They're using burnt offerings of pigeons and turtle doves. Shein bekorbanot tzibur of. Oh, sorry, ve'ein mekaitzim, not being. Because you can't use ketz mizbeach as these birds. You have to use behemoths. Okay, it's either behemoths or it's ophis. Okay, I skipped the page here. I lost track of this. Look at this one. This is talking about we have a Kohen, Levium. What?
This is the same way that Roman tax clubs work.
Yeah, tax farmers.
I remember if there's an influence one way or the other.
Tax is such a negative word. What is saying it's taxing? I mean, it's taking a toll. And a toll, right? It doesn't sound like something good. It's not like you're just paying the price for something. It's not fair. Taxation and tolls are never fair, by the way. So everybody who goes into our bias is not supposed to wear shoes, correct? But technically speaking, you can wear socks. You can keep your feet warm some other way. Like what we do when we go to our bias, we wear thick socks. Some people wear their slippers, whatever it is. So it's not like you're completely barefoot. And there's a big difference, by the way, if you're walking around the floor is cold and you're wearing socks, and walking around straight, touching the floor, correct? HaKohanim, because they're standing on the floor constantly, and they're not allowed to have even socks. That's a chatzitza. They also eat a lot of meat. What's a Kohen's meal? A Kohen's on duty that week. It's basically walking around barefoot 24/7. And it's not like they have lettuce and tomatoes and oatmeal for breakfast. What's breakfast for the Kohen? I don't know, roasted meat. And what's lunch? Roasted meat. What's supper? Roasted meat. Right? That's what they're giving him when he's on duty. I don't know, how many times a day could you eat roasted meat or stewed meat? Not only that, So they're walking around in the cold, on the cold floor. They're forced to eat meat basically because that's what their job is to do, and they're only wearing a simple, thin layer of a linen cloak. That's what they're wearing. They're not even wearing a shirt. They're wearing one layer on their. They're basically wearing those pants, those short pants, and a cloak and a hat and a belt. One single layer. Haim cholin b'meihen. They get sick in their stomach. Yeah.
I think I would
What?
to use the temple not allowed to have a heated floor. There are a lot
We
of
discussed
Romans
this
built
last week. You could technically do it, but in the olden days, remember, they knew how to heat up in the bathhouse. If you could put, wooden boards in a bathhouse, that was the way to do it. To make a whole temple, to have a heated floor, they didn't have the technology for that. They didn't do that yet. Well,
did.
well,
The Romans did. I'm
yeah,
just
but in
saying that
bathhouse
they
type settings, but they couldn't do it in like marble floors. They know ways to heat marble floors. So Steve constantly
You have the
pipes. Nowadays, what do they do?
not the pipes. You have I forgot what it's called. You have uh, hot water running through,
Yeah.
like, underneath.
Yeah, but you couldn't do that with marble. Marble is an insulator. Let's say you have a marble slab, even just this thick. There's hot water underneath. It's not heating up the upper layer. They didn't have the technology to do that. How do they make ice rinks, by the way? What do they use in all the sports stadiums in America? What do? They use super cooled liquid going through pipes under the floor, and they just pour water on the floor and it freezes into ice. That's how they make a hockey rink, right? So in a place where they have a hockey rink, they basically keep it frozen all season long, right? They don't melt it all season. And then, wait a minute, but then they want to play basketball in the rink. Madison Square Garden, how do they do it? What do they do? So what they do is they lay basically foam over the rink, the ice, and then they put the hardwood basketball floor, put it together like jigsaw puzzle over the insulator. And if you don't insulate it well, then you get a lot of condensation on the basketball floor, and suddenly you get mortar forms there, and the players are slipping. So you have to know how to do this right. But this is new technology that you have a way to cool the floor, heat the floor. They had a ways, like I said, the Romans could do it. They heat the bathhouse, but those are wooden slabs, wooden slats. Underneath the wood, you could have like boiling water and stuff. But they didn't do this. The temple did not have heated floors.
Do with stuff. I know you can do that with stuff.
But not in the but not the size of the temple. They didn't do this in the olden days, and it didn't exist then.
I'm not asking whether they did
Yeah.
do it. I'm asking whether you can do it.
No, they couldn't. It's good enough that in the second temple they already had a water channel, constant supply of water going through the temple, so it was a trickle, like Yechezkel said. Yechezkel talks about Messianic times. Perhaps this is just a mushal for something. That's what it seems to be. He talks about the trickle coming out of the Holy of Holies, and as it goes farther and farther from the Holy of Holies, the water level keeps rising, gets stronger and stronger. You know what I'm talking about? You're familiar with the prophecy?
It's been a while since I've.
Okay, so Yechezkel mentioned this. So what they did in Second Temple times is they had a water channel constantly going through the temple. It provided water, and it kept fresh water underneath the courtyard where they had the mikveh, where they put the kior every night. But it also allowed for it that there was a trickle of water going right down through the middle of the courtyard. Just a trickle, such that when they stopped it up at near the Nicanor gate, it started flooding the entire temple courtyard. That's how they washed out the courtyard. Okay, that was the Amah. This water line. The fichach ma'amidin minuneh echad sheyeh mevaker otan. They had to have basically the infirmary doctor for the Kohanim, the one who's making sure the Kohanim are doing well. Umarapei kol tachluihem. He has to be able to deal with all their illnesses. Lo seik bahen tamid. He's always worked with them. Huvan ashav tishtachat yado. Basically, a temple doctor and his men. So that's an important thing. I mean, it's 1 week on duty, and the Kohanim are already not feeling so good. I would imagine that poor group that has to come in January, right in the middle of January. January 2013 in Israel set a record, 28 days of rain out of 31 days of the month. And then it can culminate it. I remember this is really hard month. It culminated with a snowstorm, one of the big, snowstorms. It was only eclipsed by the one in December 2013, which basically knocked out power throughout the country. So you could imagine the Kohanim on duty that week are, basically coming down with colds and everything. You need someone to basically dig out cisterns and these water storage units. How did they used to store water in the olden days? big hole in the ground. You make a big hole in the ground, you put some plaster in it, and you hope no one goes into that water, and that was your water supply over the winter. Over the summer. You hope that gathers rain during the winter, and it lasts until the rains come back. And he also fixes up the cisterns that are meant for the public. The public shows up on Shavuos. The rain stopped a few weeks ago. They need water. So that everyone in Jerusalem has water. And also all the pilgrims. So eventually they came up with the system that they found the spring, the Gihon, and the Gihon used to be much more accessible to Jerusalem. It flowed right outside, basically on the surface, and that provided people with their water. Who made this? Who changed it? Basically cut an artificial channel so that the waters of the Gihon would go underground and not be available for the invaders. And then they come out of the ground some other place. Are you guys familiar with this? You've been in the water tunnels? Who did this? Mentioned the Mishneh. Chizkiyahu HaMelech did it. Okay, so they had to make sure that there's a water supply for the pilgrims. There's another person who's in charge of the professionals who make the showbread. And he's the one to make sure that the showbread is happening the way it's supposed to be. And also there's someone in charge of the Torah. Because I'll mention specific families. Mashmat, the Rambam doesn't say the families here, doesn't mention them by name. Why? Because it could very well be, God willing, we'll rebuild the temple. We're not going to look for those same people again. We'll see whoever's the best at the job. What? Yeah. So they actually said that there was some, I think Machon HaMikdash had this. There was people who were practicing how to make the showbread. They showed how to do it. Showbread is halachically matzah, but it has to be puffy. Matzah does not have to be a cracker, as you guys know. How many people leave yeshiva and just make this assumption that matzahs have to be crackers? Basically, everybody alive thinks that, right? Well,
Can't imagine how we go through here.
yeah, but I've had big rabbis even say, of course, matzah means cracker. Like how could it be? Like that's what we do. Or Ashkenazim have to have matzah crackers. They take Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach out of context. Thank God there's also big rabbis who say, like Rav Shechter said, why does matzah have to be a cracker? It could be soft, it could be puffy. What makes saying matzah is you did not leaven the dough. You didn't let it rise beforehand. So they make the dough quickly. It can be made with the soft dough, has a high water content. You can still bake it. It'll be nice and soft bread. It will not be chametz. Why? Because it's not leavened at all. Okay. Vechad mimuneh. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. This is very interesting. So they have to make new curtains all the time. The parochas takes wear and tear. You ever notice you get a nice new velvet parochas for the aron, or you get a nice velvet like cover for the shulchan where they read the Torah. How long do those things last? Or stay nice, like this parochas already. How old do you think it is?
I will not be able to guess. I have no experience.
Now, there's some places you see they have really old parochas. Basically, they make them out of velvet now, right? In the olden days, before they invented velvet, what were they using to make parochas out of? The ones in the Mishkan. It says explicitly, they're made out of tolat shani, argaman, techeles. They're made out of wool, basically. Okay, the special dyed wool. This one in charge of parochot is exactly as it says. He's the ones who in charge of the ones who weave the curtains and the ones who embroider them. What's between weaving and embroidering? The weave is the basic body of the thing, and embroidery is, look at this one. The weave is the basic material, and then all the fancy stuff on it, the lettering, etc. That's the rikmah. Sheyu muchanot leichal v'sharim. They use it for the leichal and also for the gates. They put parochot. They put these curtains. U'shtei parochot ayusim b'chol shana v'shana. They'd make two new curtains every year. La'avdil bein hakodesh v'bein kodesh hakodeshim. Right, the two curtains between the Holy of Holies and the Holy that were suspended from the ceiling to the floor. So they swapped those out every single year. That was what they did. You can imagine how expensive this was. The chutei parochot kifulin shisha shisha. They have these six-stranded. What do you call it? What's the chutim? It's six-stranded, but it's called the yarn. No, what's it called?
Sure. I mean, if you're dealing with wool, you can call it
It's not yarn though. It's the thread. It's the thread is six-stranded. Six-stranded thread. That's the word. Varba'a minim hayuba, and has four types of material in this. Sheish, utchelet, vargaban, v'tolat shani. The ones I mentioned. Sheish is linen, and the rest is the color, three tricolor wool. This is blue wool, this is purple wool, and this is red wool. Today, someone showed me that they have examples of tolat shani wool. Everybody knows what tchelis looks like nowadays, thank God. It's bluish. And the argaman is something similar, but it's purple. And tolat shani is a lot more red. It's even less red than this. It's more toward the orange scale. By the way, they make it, and it's a well-known thing. That was never missing from Jewish history, tolat shani. Crimson. Matter of fact, who is making their uniforms out of red wool? This dyed red wool. The British Army, redcoats. They've been doing it forever. They never stopped.
And we know that it's that.
It's very similar. The point is, they take wool and they dye it deep red. That's what this is. So the same materials with which they were using the Big Day Kahuna, which are mentioned in Parshas Truma, is what they're using to make these parachot. So they don't use velvet, certainly, or whatever modern materials we're using. Silk, did they ever use silk? The Torah enjoins us to give the most expensive materials. They use, let's say, precious gemstones, right? Rubies and emeralds, sapphires, carbuncles, etc. The ones on the list there of the Choshen and all that. And then it says, Techelis Argaman, and of course, silver and gold. Where's the silk? Why isn't silk on the list? It wasn't really that common when they were building the Mishkan. It was basically the Chinese kept it to themselves. It was in Roman times they started bringing over more, but still was like a secret they wanted to keep to themselves. Fine, so no silk. And each one of these, once again, is six-stranded. Hare esrim v'arba'a chutin. So basically, to make one of the threads, you take 6 tchelises, 6 argobans, 6 tolat shani, and 6 sheish, and you spin that all together, and you spin it all together until you get this a chut, basically the strand that has 24 separate strands in there. So what color does this look like combined? If I combine white, red, blue, and purple together, it looks, from far away, it basically looks purple, right? Purple with red and blue on both sides and a little bit of white. But up close, you can see the individual colors. So you have basically this. This is an example. This is the Choshen, made out of the same stuff. This is what they show. You guys ever see this picture? It was basically made using this recipe. It's equal parts white, red, blue, and purple. So from far away, the general look is purple, but when you look up close, you could make out the individual colors. And then what they embroider on, using golden strands, they basically embroider images of, the Nesher, the Aryeh, the Shor, and the Kruvim, right? The things that, the Kruvim, Maaseh Choshev, that's how they used to do it. Next, the Tefach Haya Ovya. How thick was this curtain total? Thickness of the curtain was a tefach. Wow, how thick is a tefach? 8 centimeters. Yes, they have to weave this thing thick. It's a lot thicker than this crushed velvet here. And they make 2 of these, and it basically spans. They have in the thing how many hundreds of kohanim it took to launder these things and to dunk them in the mikvah. It's obviously exaggerated numbers, but this was a real deal. So every year in the temple, they had a new dedication of new curtains. Well,
This had to be like layered. You do like one layer and then you fasten it.
I don't know. I've never worked a loom before, but this was a big deal. And it says here, Val Shivim Ushtaim Nirin Hayatan Nereget. 72 looms. Need to put this together. Or Karabaim Vruchba Esrim. Its length is 40 amos. Vruchba Esrim. 40 by 20. Okay. So it has to go ceiling. It covers the entire width of the temple of the Heichal. Yes. And how did they hang it? What time of year did they rehang this? Yeah.
So heavy.
Yeah. Ushlosha srei parochot hayu b'mikdash sheni. Actually, they had 13 parochot in the second temple. Sheva al shiva shari azara. Every gate to the azara had its own curtain. V'achad al pitcho she'ulam. This is the one I mentioned. The ones that actually have the temple. The petach ha'ulam had one. V'achad al pitcho she'leichal, and one at the opening of the heichal. The ulam is the room that was the anteroom to the temple. It was always open. Everyone didn't have doors. Remember we saw that? You guys remember the ulam? Ushtaim ledvir beino levena kodesh. The actual inside of the temple had two. The two that Kohen Gadol would walk between the two with the incense and the fire pans. Ushtaim kenegdan ba'aliyah. And also in the upper room of the temple. We saw in Klei HaMikdash, in Beit HaBechira before, that the temple was basically 2 stories. And there was the whole main room of the temple and a fancy wooden carved out ceiling. And then there was the floor. And then a floor on top was basically a whole big empty room, Keneged, the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodeshim. And there was trapdoors in that room, but it was also made up to look really nice. The second floor of the temple, even though there was no service there was no kelim there, it was just another very nice room. So that room also had curtains. Okay, very interesting. Do you remember seeing the pictures? Okay, so you go back over here. Where they put it over here? Look at this. Look, here. Makbili also has his own picture. This is basically the Otem, that's the foundation of the temple. And this is the Heichal. The Heichal has a height of 40 amos. And then there's the Kiur, which is the fancy ceiling, was an amma thick. And there's the Beit Chalfa, Tikra, and Ma'aziva. Tikra is the ceiling, and Ma'aziva is like the floorboards. And then there's the Aliyah, which is another 40 amma high main room of the second floor of the temple, which is also made out very nicely. They didn't do any service up there. It was just another very nice room, the second floor. So that second floor also had a parochos to it. Obviously, in the first temple and in the Mishkan, they didn't have this second floor. Okay, so yeah, let's go on a little bit. We have basically 1 minute to study this halacha. We just read that. Vlada tuma is a first degree tuma. It's not the actual tummy itself. Dead sherets touched it, whatever it is. They would immerse it within the temple. Okay? They'd have to purify it. Then they could put it right back into use. Well, of course, they would dry it, but they didn't have to wait until the next day or until nightfall to put it back. Normally, a person who's contaminated, like a Kohen, gets contaminated, he has to go to mikvah. He's out of service until when? Nightfall, Hariv Shemesh. But it doesn't need that. It was tameified with something that's an actual avatuma. So now it itself is the rishon, it's not the sheni. They would dunk it outside the temple, and they put it out to dry in the chel, not in the actual temple courtyard. They couldn't put it back into use because it needs hariv shemesh. So we'll stop there. I think we have questions or comments. Let's see. Very interesting things. I wonder what they're going to do in a third temple. You make curtains like this anymore? It's just not the style anymore.
But of course you can.
You could, yeah. I think maybe they don't improve the. Would they use velvet nowadays? Would they use silk? Would they use whatever fancy materials people are using nowadays? I don't know. It's not enjoined. The only paroches that the Torah says to actually make using this recipe is what? The actual paroches between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim. So that one would seem to be non-negotiable. Either way, so we'll wish everybody good Shabbos and Chag Sameach. We're not going to have shir next Thursday at night, but you guys are welcome to come anyways on Thursday. We'll have some Yontif. So we look forward to seeing you guys then. Be well and study hard.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.